In the hot seat this morning is Mutula Kilonzo Jr., the senator from Makueni County, Wiper Vice Chairperson. How are you doing?
I'm well. I'm well.
I can see you are well.
Yes, doing very well.
You survived the stuff that was happening. You know, it was the entire public limelight was on you guys in the Senate last week.
Last week, yes.
And the previous week, of course,
yes,
with what was happening with the impeachment of Governor Waitito.
Yes.
We'll discuss that as well in the course of the show. Let's start with the Kitui,
yes,
Saturday,
yes,
BBI.
Yes.
At some point, we saw your party leader, Kalonzo Musyoka. You know, he's the one who spoke before the opposition leader, Raila Odinga. He stood up and he called the entire Wiper brigade.
Yes.
It appeared like it was a Wiper choreographed party.
Oh, the Kitui, the Kitui function.
Yes.
No. In fact, it wasn't. The correct position is that the BBI secretariat or team had arranged that the Kitui meeting is the BBI for purposes of Ukambani region. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a Wiper meeting. In fact, Wiper attended as guests. It was actually arranged by the Kitui governor in collaboration with Makueni governor.
Right.
Yes, and that is why the resolution for the Ukambani region was read there.
Okay.
The first instance.
So, of course, Wiper has participated in this BBI process, right?
Yes.
You presented your memorandum to the BBI task force when it was going around the country.
Yes, I was one of members of the team
that participated in this.
Yes.
What is Wiper's strategy? What do you hope to see in the BBI at the end of the day?
The conversation on the constitutional reform is both urgent and it's timely. Most people might not know it's actually 10 years after we promulgated this constitution. Most people also do not know that the Wiper Secretary General then was the Justice Minister, my late father. And therefore, we have a lot of interest in this document. But more importantly, there are certain milestones in the Constitution. Certain milestones in the Constitution, which I think that 10 years after the promulgation are things we need to look at. And there are two portions. The election component, elections generally, and then devolution generally. Those are two things that are, and possibly the Bill of Rights. Those are the three main gains of the new constitution. And if we are going to interrogate those three portions, I think we'll do Kenyans a favor. The question is, devolution 10 years on, have we achieved what we wanted to
Devolution
achieve?
7 years on. Let's be
10.
practical.
No, it's 10. Let's say call it 10. For purposes of the Constitution. Let's call it 10 years after the Constitution.
For practical purposes,
okay,
let's say
7 years if you insist and you want to insist on it.
Actually, he's clearly insisting.
Yes, I always insist.
And yet the promulgation period is actually 10 years since it was promulgated.
It's true.
Yes.
It's a
So if you're going to assess the devolution in totality, you can only assess the technical part is 10 years. The devolution has been with us for 10 years, but we have had senators, governors for 7 years. If that's what you want, I give it to you.
Okay.
But we want to assess. I personally am very concerned as to whether, because we the senators have been trying to make sure that we do not become the undertakers of death of devolution, like it happened in 1966. The Senate was wound up, and therefore it will answer your question as to the necessity of having a Senate for purposes of devolution. But more importantly, most people do not know that devolution is not having governors and senators at work. The actual devolution is actually something we call fiscal devolution. Means resources must follow the functions under Article 187. And actually, that's the elephant in the room.
And has it worked from what you see? No, it hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked because while the national government says the function of health is devolved, it isn't. Because all the resources are in Nairobi. 93% of the function is with governors, but with no money. The Ministry of Health is easily the ministry with the highest budget in Kenya.
And what percentage of the resources that are supposed to go to the Ministry of Health are held within the Ministry of Health within Nairobi?
It's 100%.
It's all the money.
The budget is at 65 to 66 billion shillings, moved up by 20 billion shillings since 2013. And therefore, that's the reason the biggest scandals in Kenya are in the Ministry of Health. because the availability of money has created an avenue for pilferage. And ideally, even when we are discussing the Big Four agenda and affordable healthcare, the bulk of the resources are sitting in the Ministry of Health in a place called Afya House. And therefore, this conversation must get to the realities on the ground. What is it when we say that a person must have healthcare 5 kilometers from their home?
Yeah.
5 kilometers from their home. Is it a reality? When you have nurses complaining about 20,000 shillings, 20,000 shillings, whilst these people are working 16 to 18 hours a day, where you have a nurse now in universal healthcare in the four counties attending to at least 200 people for one nurse. Have you truly devolved that function? That's the sort of conversation I would like to have.
So is that what you presented to the BBI task force as a wiper?
I said we must devolve resources. The conversation in Nairobi is resources. While the president keeps shuffling ministers and moving the Ministry of Irrigation from one place to the other, the correct position is that irrigation is a devolved function. Agriculture is a devolved function. When the president talks about rice, when the price of rice in Mwea, when he was in Mwea, that's actually a conversation that you'll be having about maize in Ukambani, because you have a bumper harvest. Milk, because you have glut. The price has moved slightly from 17 to a certain figure. That is a conversation that must be done at that level, so that it doesn't become an issue that is discussed in Nairobi.
Right. So now we hear that and we say, obviously, it's a conversation that needs to be had at that level. But then we keep asking ourselves, then, what stops that conversation from then being had? Because obviously, by the time people are having a conversation over and over again, in reality, after having the conversation, something is either then done or not done about it. So if the conversation is not being had, how are we going to now jump from one step to the next? Otherwise, we'll be talking for years.
My problem about this country that I love is something we call political will. There's just too much talk, but very little political.
Very little will.
Very little
from
will.
The entire political class, or is it from
entire political class?
There's the will to talk.
There's a will to talk, but the will to do is very little. To the extent that even this conversation about constitutional reform, I sometimes feel as if we are being dishonest with our country. Is good. People now, some of the governors are happy to participate in BBI because it covers the corruption that they have been doing in their counties. Now they are wearing white clothes so they look as if they're mweupe kama pamba. There's dishonesty in the conversations that we are having in the country. But if you go and ask Wanjiku Muikali what they actually need, they will break it down to certain basic things. And I've started just one: health. Just one. Just one.
They want better service. Better service means that money follows that function.
They want drugs in their hospitals. They want to be attended. If you go to Kenyatta and as a referral hospital, there's people are sending doctors and hospitals are sending people to Kenyatta for malaria. Then you're not in a country that is thinking about Kenyans. Because it's a referral hospital. You should send people to Kenyatta for referral things.
Actually, malaria should be dealt with at a dispensary.
At a dispensary level.
It's that basic.
It's a basic thing.
It's basic.
And yet people are dying in Baringo now.
People are dying in Baringo. People are dying everywhere in the country. People are in fundraisers every Thursday to Sunday about somebody who died in a hospital. Hospital there. I can tell you, there are WhatsApp platforms about everything. But half of it is death resulting out of ill health, etc., etc. People are suffering.
So you don't want to be the undertakers. You, as
yes, the Senate. We don't want to be the undertakers.
You want to be the ones who safeguard and ensure that these things happen.
We want to be the firewall.
Falls right down your alley. You are the ones who should be advocating that these funds actually move down.
But we have.
But do you have the constitutional teeth to do that?
Yes.
As I said, will. If there was will, it's not about biting. No. It's about sometimes this country just needs people to do the right thing. As I said before, I'm reading a book called The Written Constitution. Britain's written constitution. They don't have it.
It doesn't exist.
But there's somebody who has written a book about England's written constitution. What is it? It says practice, usages, good manners.
Is it tradition?
You know, just good manners. The Prime Minister says we have prorogued Parliament. The Supreme Court sits in 2 weeks and says, go to hell. You know, that sort of thing. There's nowhere in the Constitution that says they will do it in a week. There's nowhere in the Constitution. But in a week's time, the Supreme Court gave an unanimous ruling, 4 pages, just quick. We have a case that we filed last year, challenging the assent of so many laws by the president without involving the Senate on matters that we consider devolved functions. The matter has not, we don't even have a bench to hear it. It has taken more than 6 months. That's what I'm talking about. It's not about teeth. It's good manners.
You know why I mentioned teeth? That as a layman such as myself, our Senate, at the best of times, apart from now, this matter of impeachment almost seems ceremonial.
It appears, but it just appears. But it's meant to appear.
That's why I'm asking. You see why
it's meant to appear.
Why I go back to the Constitution and whether you have the constitutional teeth is this. I think the role of the Senate as it was envisaged was a lot more than what we're seeing in practice. Now, in the absence of that particular power to practice what they should, in the absence of what you call goodwill, your role will become very preeminent. Because goodwill we have, the absence of goodwill is what we see in abundance. Now, the teeth that I speak of would fill that gap. The Senate would then be in a position to do the very thing that we see not being done. That's where my question came from.
All over the world, in fact, the Senate, which is supposed to be a house of people with wisdom, a referral house, you actually don't give them, you don't write too much about the Bundesrat in Germany. You don't write too many things about the Rajya Sabha in India. But when they touch something, or the Senate of Australia, they don't just write too many things. They write just like Article 96. And now, in your free time, just read Article 96. Article 96, and we've said this before to anybody who cares to listen, but people don't read too much. Our functions as Parliament are in Article 94, as Parliament, which is the National Assembly and Senate. But our special functions, which includes impeachment, are in Article 96 and Article 181. So we have been given all the mandate that we are supposed to have. It's only that, you know, it doesn't suit, you know, the powers that be.
Exactly.
So this is where the
discretion, you know, you can play around.
So this is where the rubber meets the road in this sense.
Is it discretion or a complete abrogation of the Constitution? Because
it's abrogation, but I'm calling it discretion. I'm being polite.
Let's take a short break and see what's happening weather-wise. This is a situation room. On the hot seat this morning is Mutula Kilonzo Jr., the Senator of Makueni County. We're discussing a lot of things. We're discussing the BBI. We're discussing Wiper's strategy for BBI. We're also discussing the role that the Senate plays in ensuring that the country is run well, from devolution to all other matters. And of course, we'll look at national politics as well. Mutula Kilonzo Jr. is in the studio on the hot seat this morning, right here in the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. And of course, what I like about Mutula and the other younger senators is they speak. Speak their mind.
But you interrupted the nice music, but it's okay.
That's what happens here. So you're saying that you have everything, all the powers bestowed on you by the Constitution as a Senate.
Yes.
But what you lack is political goodwill from higher ups.
Absolutely.
Why do you need higher ups to do your job?
Eric, let's be specific. The executive. When you talk about higher ups, man, you're going to go to heaven.
You're all the way up.
Let's just focus.
So the national executive.
National executive, yes. The national executive.
But what the job that you're supposed to do is make sure actually to check the national executive as well and ensure that you're protecting the counties. Are you saying that you're unable to do your job because the executive is much more powerful than you are?
No, not at all. Not at all. What all the executive needs to do is make sure that they bypass the Senate in so many ways, including legislation. The only way to dismantle the Senate, I can tell you, out of what, maybe 60 bills passed by the Senate, maybe one has been signed into law. and that is the assumption of office, the one that God...
This is the one that you guys are celebrating on all of...
Nyoro.
Yes.
It's the only one.
No, not James Nyoro.
James Nyoro.
Yes.
And that bill was done in the last session, brought back by Kimani Wamatangi, and now it's law. You know, I was wondering, actually, by myself, wondering, how is it that this law was fast-tracked,
found its way back,
found its way in the National Assembly, and then was assented? What was, at that time, I was wondering. Now I know.
Now it's clear.
Now it's clear why that bill had to become law. There was a plan.
long game.
Yes. But that's what I'm saying. That if you give the impression, if you give the impression that the Senate cannot legislate for counties, you have no power. You will legislate about matters concerning counties by bypassing the Senate. Majority leader of National Assembly will stand up and say whatever he wants to say about the Senate, and nobody says anything. What do you think? What do you think that means when a governor comes, looks at you, and says, "Forget it"? That's what I'm saying. If you're going to protect counties, ask yourself, and if you read the Constitution, anywhere in the Constitution, you will not find the word protect, except where we are promoting the Constitution vis-a-vis fundamental rights. Yeah. The word protect, we have paused to wonder, it's against who? But now it's clear, it's protect Kenyans from the executive. The executive.
That's where the problem is.
That's where the problem is. And this saying that power is sweet and power is sweeter while concentrated is actually true. The more you try and devolve power, and I'm talking about power, the centrality of power is not power for the sake of it. It's the power of the pass, the kitty. The minute you center the power back to Nairobi, you start reversing. Pending bills are now being discussed at the Ministry of
the Treasury.
The Treasury.
Yes.
The Treasury is controlling pending bills of counties. They are dictating. They do a list and say, go and pay so-and-so, go and pay so-and-so. And then CECs of finance are queuing in Nairobi 3 times a month or 4 times a month. If Miss is closed and open when they feel like.
Yep.
Former CS Rotich used to look at the bank accounts and say, oh, by the way, Makueni has 1 billion shillings. You don't need money. Let me send it to Turkana. That is called interference. And that is what we should protect Kenyans. The minute you allocate funds to counties, those funds under Article 219 are not supposed to be touched. But what does national government do? It staggers the budget. Staggers it. Sometime in May, they close IFMIS. Sometimes early June, they open it for 2 weeks. And then they send all the money to the account. And 30th, they close IFMIS.
Close it again. And that's it. And the year is closed.
The year is closed, and the money allocated on development kitty for counties is a third.
And it comes in the final 2 months.
Final quarter.
Of the financial year.
Yes.
And then you're told, go ye forth and develop.
Go ye forth and develop.
In this short, now we've given you the money, but you have a very short time within which now you're supposed to do it.
It's actually not possible.
So then we here look at all of you and we say you're actually not doing your job.
Exactly.
Because look, you have money.
Yes.
National Treasury has told us that you have the money.
Yes.
So why are you not working?
Exactly.
This is the question that we ask.
Yes.
Because now we don't see the inner workings or the intrigues of what's actually happening.
That is the problem.
But the Senate does not raise these questions loud enough.
This was going to be my next question. Then why have we not heard this before?
What I'm proposing that you get an extra TV here. And you tune into KBC.
So we can watch...
so that you can watch the proceedings. Because if you had asked me that question, I would have brought you Hansards. To show that we have questioned this idea of stoppage of funds.
No. The final words of that accusation that I made was loud enough. Yes, you may raise all these questions, but if you keep doing it every day, and the national executive will sit back and say, "Yeah, let them talk." We're used to this kind of thing.
So what are you are you proposing? We shut down the Senate?
Yes.
We protest?
Yes.
We protest to State House.
Actually, when you look at the role of the Senate, as it's listed, if you talk about 4 main roles. Yeah. What the Mheshimiwa is talking about is the third one. Apart from determining the allocation, their role is actually oversight. This is the Constitution now.
Yes.
So if you do it on a daily basis, it just means you are going to the office and doing what you're supposed to do every day.
Yes.
I don't think they can shout about it too much.
Louder than that?
No, it's not possible to shout about it too much. The only time you can stop shouting about it is when what they're supposed to do is actually done. Then there'll be nothing to talk about on that particular subject.
So you take these challenges as well to the courts, right? Like
yes,
now
we have.
you
We filed a matter in court.
You keep filing these matters in court.
No, we keep. We filed one matter in 2013. This is the second one. In the first one, we filed a matter on division of revenue because in 2013, the National Assembly forwarded the division of revenue bill to the president for assent without the input of the Senate. Last year, the division of the Appropriation Act, the Appropriation, Eric Latif, maybe you don't know. And did you say ndu? Ndu.
Yes.
That's a Kamba word. Ndu. You know, if I bang this table, I say ndu. Anyway, the Appropriation Act was signed into law before division. The appropriation is the one that assigns money to the various levels, the two levels of government.
Yeah.
So before we determine the division of revenue bill, the appropriation was signed
Has already happened.
into law. So when we were doing the division of revenue, it was like an act of, what do you call it? It's like whitewashing.
It was an activity in futility.
It's like a fair comply. Something that had already been done, determined and decided. And we told the court that this is unlawful. And the Chief Justice looked at us and said, this is politics.
Yeah, go sort it out.
Go sort it out politically. What do we do? Throw stones at one another?
Yes.
No, we cannot do that.
Can I ask the question? If indeed you put the horse before the cart, as in this case,
Yes.
surely can that particular law then stand when
It can't.
Okay, you've answered my question. Because I was going to say, when the process of constituting it is unconstitutional, then how then does it actually? But you've answered my question. It can't.
It's unlawful.
But the wisdom of the Chief Justice at that point was, look, this is a political matter that requires political negotiations.
Eric, that's ducking.
Is that how you solved it?
That's the word.
He's ducking.
It came out from him.
No, he ducked.
Yes.
He ducked.
But is that how you resolved it?
You know, and I reminded the registrar recently when they came to the Senate committee after their money was deducted. I said, you know, when we were telling you about appropriation, you thought it was a joke.
No, it's biting you now.
It's biting you. And that's how it starts. You start fighting institutions. You fight and make sure the institutions cannot, because institutions are supposed to check one another. There's a way the judiciary is supposed to check the executive without necessarily appearing as if you're quarreling.
Right.
Same with the Senate executive. So we're supposed to be orderly. We're in a home, we're in a family, we agree. This is my boundary, don't come. But that's not what happens. The executive sits and decides, no. You have too much money. Cut this. Take this and build a road here. Go and open this. Go and open the other. It's the same discussion about debt ceiling. How we moved from 6 trillion to 9 trillion is atrocious. It's atrocious. It's a violation of the Constitution in every form of the word.
Did the Senate have a say in this?
They voted.
It came to us.
And?
It passed.
Only 7 of us could withstand
the pressure.
The heat of saying that the country cannot continue borrowing without a proper framework. If you're in a hole, you stop digging. You don't continue digging.
So that only the next 7 of you voted against
it. Only seven of us voted against it. And what was our position? Our position was not that government doesn't need to borrow. Our position was that since you've realized the government has been borrowing unlawfully, and CS Rotich was charged for exceeding the debt ceiling, charged in court, one of the charges. The reason he did is because when he sits somewhere in Treasury, and Treasury, by the way, is another fourth arm of government, I can tell you. Treasury by itself is the fourth arm of government. By itself, sat and signed money, signed this to Chinese. I'm just glad. I mean, I'm not glad, but coronavirus is going to help us because we'll stop going to China. Signed this, and the other, and the other, and the other. Because there was nobody to check what they were doing. What you don't know, Eric, is that national debt is the first charge on our money. Before you decide whatever goes to Makueni,
first we pay the debt.
Let's pay debt. So if you want to kill devolution, what do? You just borrow some more. Just borrow some more. Send money late.
There'll not be enough to take to Makueni.
Exactly. Finally, what is going to happen? Finally, there will be no services, and Kenyans are going to be up in arms and say this devolution is not working. Let's go back to Nairobi.
Forget the whole thing.
Forget the whole thing.
So what is Wiper? How is Wiper trying to protect this now? Bringing it back to that question of Wiper and the strategy on the BBI. This is a national conversation. You're participating in it. How are you ensuring that this kind of conversations are what are seen in the BBI?
I made a presentation to the Yusuf Haji-led committee. Unfortunately, Yusuf Haji and Amos Wako are pioneer senators. They have been with us. I have been with Wako on the matter of strengthening the Senate. We have a proposal. They said in this document, which I have, that devolve between 35 to 50% of national resources to counties. We are at 40. Governors at 45. But we have said do 40%, not 15%, and do it not on the last audited revenue.
That's the other thing.
Eric Latif, we are dealing with, when the budget of Kenya is at 3 trillion, the money that is supposed to be allocated to counties does not reach it's about $1 trillion. Because that's the
last audited account of which year?
2016.
2016, 2017.
Imagine.
We are in 2019, 2020.
We're in 2019, 2020. And we are dealing with $1 billion shillings.
Very clever, isn't it?
It's so clever.
It's ingenious.
And it's disgustingly clever that we can be dealing with $1 trillion shillings to 47 counties. And 47 counties, Eric Latif, is the country. 47 is Kenya.
Yes.
And you're actually talking, devolution is about services. You're devolving services and you're dealing with $1 trillion.
Where does the rest of this money go?
Central government.
Sorry, it doesn't go, it doesn't move.
National government.
Where
does it stay?
Where does it stay? And for
It's
what
a
purposes does it stay where it stays?
Treasury.
The fourth arm of government.
Fourth arm of government. So if I was to be asked, the real conversation about Kenya today is where is the money Kenyans are paying taxes for? That is the discussion.
That's a bigger discussion.
There's a bigger discussion.
So we'll come now
the
to
rest are, they're like flower girls in a wedding,
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
or not.
The wedding will still continue, with or without the flower girls.
We'll discuss the flower girl when we come out of this short traffic break. And of course, the flower girl will include a regional government, will include an expanded executive, will include all these other matters of what the retiring governors want, what the senators want for the future, for their political future. This is the situation of Kenya's biggest conversation. Mutula Kilonzo Jr., Makueni Senator, is in the studio. Streaming on Facebook, Spice FM KE. We are also on Twitter at Spice FM KE. We are on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. Countrywide, Mombasa 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, Eldoret 96.7, Malindi 97.7, Nyeri 90.9, and of course Nairobi 94.4. This is a situation of Kenya's biggest conversation. My name is Eric Latif. We have Nduoko, C.T. Muga, and Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr., the Senator of Makueni County, Wiper Democratic Movement Kenya Vice Chairperson, talking about BBI and national politics and the role of the Senate and the role of the fourth arm of government, now that he's told us that there is one. This is the National Treasury. So we saw what was happening, of course, the declaration that came out as what the people of Ukambani would like to see in the BBI. And some of these things that you're saying, I'm not sure they got the prominence that you're placing now.
Those things will come when the committee finally sits and you get into the detail. Because you can't actually in a public rally get into too much detail. The detail is difficult to start disseminating in a political platform. And the way the rallies are, is the way the rallies are. Yes, it's very difficult to get into the details of what is an executive prime minister, what is a non-executive prime minister, more resources to counties, 35, 40, 50. You can't get into those details at the rally. And I've said this before, and maybe I can bring this up now that you have mentioned it. If this document, this very nicely done report, had a bill accompanying it, that would have a clause written about the details, it is very easy to then sort of distill for purposes of public consumption, that where they have proposed funds will go to counties 35 to 50, they would put clauses and say the 35 to 50 will come from here.
Yep.
They have even proposed something about debt. Amazing that while we're discussing national debt and it has shot to over slightly 55% of GDP or more, or 90, they're saying we should return it to 45. I'm actually wondering how. But that discussion about 45% of GDP, I was proved right that you can't actually do absolute figures because the BBI team has told us to go back to to percentages as opposed to numerical figures. Because if your GDP is at 9 trillion, your debt ceiling can be at 9 trillion.
Truly.
So you would have a table. In fact, I've done a summary, for example, of this one. It's a summary of each chapter with what needs to be done. Is it policy? Is it a bill? Is it a policy change? Is it behavioral attitude? And in all the chapters, I have summarized what needs a referendum, what doesn't need a referendum, what needs policy, what needs a bill. So if this document had something like an implementation matrix like this, it would be easy. If you go to divisive elections, it has many issues. It has how many? It has nearly 9.
9 issues on divisive elections.
No, 7. 7 issues on divisive elections. How do you do IBC? How do you do the referendum? How do you make the composition of the cabinet where they are proposing that cabinets, CSA will be members of the National Assembly? So the discussion will be, if the CS is sitting in the National Assembly for a matter, for example, of devolution, and when we need to summon him, if you are in the Senate, what do you do?
You'll be summoning your fellow MP.
Exactly. So that if it was in a bill, it would show how
clarify.
that would, The Prime Minister, according to the BBI, needs to be an MP, correct?
Yep.
And that MP will either be the person who is from the party with the largest, or a person who enjoys the support of the majority of people, of members in the National Assembly.
It's all National Assembly.
It's all National Assembly. Now, if we need to ask the Prime Minister questions and they've put a Prime Minister hour in the National Assembly, will there be another one in the Senate for matters on devolution? How do you do that? That clause would there's a leader of opposition. The leader of opposition and the shadow cabinet, for example, CS, there will be a CS on either side. Where will they be seated? How will they be seated? How will they be answering questions? And on what is the relationship then of the National Assembly vis-a-vis this shadow cabinet secretaries with the Senate, where we are, for example, like Mutula Kilonzo, my friend Mutula Kilonzo now, the proposed Minister for Health. If there's a problem in water, there's an outbreak, and we need to ask questions. Where does he come and sit with us, or do we go there?
Do you visit the?
So there will be a clause. It will
to
be
clarify on these issues.
On these issues, so that when you're going to Mwananchi to explain that when the presidential loser will become leader of opposition, you'll be sitting in the National Assembly or you'll be sitting in the Senate.
So I hear you saying that with all of this, without these recommendations, whether they be in policy, whether they be in referendum, whether they be in behavioral change, kind of like something needs to be done. Without all of these recommendations, then this document really doesn't come alive and it doesn't become something tangible that people then can understand. How then would it work? Without that, we just have words.
Without this document, you have what we call a wish list. It's a wish list
of stuff to do.
It's stuff to do.
Are we in that phase of the project, of the process then, where we are now crystallizing the wish list into something more tangible? Is this where we are supposed to be? Because one of the things that I raised, of course, when the BBI report came out, is I questioned the fact that it does not have an implementation matrix. I said, this is something that we have needed. But then I was, I was convinced. It has to go through another process. Just wait, observe. It's going through a process. This is a political process as well. The task force now goes and creates that 30-member technical team that will bring it down together into a kind of document that you have now. This is policy, this is bill, and bill, here is a tangible bill. This goes into referendum. These are the referendum questions.
Yes.
Is this, would you say that it's going through that process?
No, it's not. It's not. I draw a contradiction between this process and the process that led to the new constitution in 2010. When before in the implementation matrix of the 2010, they did a draft similar to this one, and they gave it a timeline. They gave it a timeline of 30 to 45 days, where the public would consume this document and give views before they got it into the drafting. But this one, for some reason, they didn't do it. For whatever reason, they didn't do that document that would then become a draft for purposes of conversation. Because this document is just a report. People must read, understand, distill it. But even then, we still don't have it in circulation like it would be. Government printer has let us down.
Does not have paper.
It doesn't have paper. But the third thing you would do, if I was the one doing it, I'm not a minister for justice, and neither do I advise government, is this document as it is good, but for purposes of Mwikali, you would make it a little simpler, sort of distill it.
Bite-sized pieces, right?
Yeah, sort of make it a small document. You don't need to circulate this document the way it is. It's too large. It's 156 pages. My summary is how many pages? My summary is 6 pages. 6 pages.
And tells us what requires referendum.
And then what I would do, the second thing I would do is I would, and because we have people here who can do this, you would translate this into Kiswahili. So you do both. Because I have, I don't know whether you have seen, have you ever seen the Kiswahili Constitution? Our Constitution in Kiswahili?
No, actually I haven't.
You haven't? No. 10 years on, you haven't? I have it. We have a Constitution translated
into Kiswahili.
So
it can be done.
It can be done. So that it becomes easy to disseminate the information. Somebody said recently that we have hijacked the process. It's true, we have hijacked the process, and somehow now the conversation is skewed. When you go to certain areas of the country, even when you're talking, everybody's wearing shades. Tanga, kieleweke, what, all these things. And therefore the conversation then becomes a little...
It's overtaken by the noise of the day.
It's overtaken. Kuria goes and sits on the ground, and what comes out of Kitui, Kuria was chased away.
He has won. He has won
Not
the headlines.
Discussion.
Yes.
He took the headlines.
You understand?
And this is why we've been...
So citizens, all of you in the media groups, just run that clip. You run that clip, and the conversations on Twitter, conversations everywhere.
It was a battleground.
It's about Moses Kuria.
Yep.
Nobody discusses what was said.
Yep.
Never.
Actually, we also discussed Nyoro.
You did?
Yes.
From Kitui?
Yes.
What did you say?
And we also said, we also discussed Charity Ngilu. Nyoro, the sentiment is, he's showing us a side that we wish we hadn't seen this early.
What you were saying would not have impeached Waititu?
Not really. No, Waititu's goose was cooked. That one, you'll tell us why it became so monumentally cooked, I'm sure. But everything about Waititu seemed to indicate that his time in office was up.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he seemed to know too.
I think I think he did. I think he did.
So
the conversation that comes out of the BBI rallies is more on the political side of things rather than more of tangible proposals that are coming out from the ground.
I think that there would have been other forums where this sort of education about this continues quietly in villages.
Absolutely.
In
who's supposed to do this, Mweshmeo?
Right.
Ideally, this task
Haji.
force, the Haji-led committee.
Do they have funding for that?
In this country, when you need money, they will get it.
They'll get it.
Governors have been given money for these rallies.
They're spending money for this.
No, they have been given money for the rallies. I'm saying.
Now you see, he's answering my question, but not the direct
No.
question. Yes.
You have got to learn satire. It's just, I've got to go around. And
yes.
The point I'm making is that you would have small gatherings out there, sitting in villages and saying, what do you people think? Do you think we should have a prime minister? What do you think about the cabinet secretary? There's somebody out there in the village, somewhere in Makueni, and I was just waiting for you to say Makueni 97.3, Spice FM. I mean, something like that, but you didn't. But things to do. Maybe I'll talk to management. But you would have those conversations out there. Although, make no mistake, this is a political process.
Well, here, this is the thing, because you
and
know what?
you cannot eliminate the politicians. You can't.
Senator, when you talk about, look,
This is politics.
The next number of rallies that you're going to have, we are not. People are already asking, what's the drama that's going to ensue, as opposed to what is going to come out of it that is going to benefit the people of Kenya. And that's the problem that we see. And we say, look, you talked about flower girls and sideshows. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
We're seeing the flower girls, we're seeing the sideshows, and the thing that's not really important. But then now you're talking about pertinent issues that really do matter to Kenyans. How then are you going to divorce all these rallies that are happening from the issues that are important to the development of this country? How?
Answer that question when you come out of this short break.
Oh.
Also give you an opportunity to have a sip of your coffee.
Oh, yeah.
This is a situation amidst Kenya's biggest conversation. Eric Latif, CT Muga Nduoko, and Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr., Senator of Makueni County. On Facebook, Spice FM KE, at Spice FM KE, Twitter, www.spicefm.co.ke. We are live streaming, of course, on all those platforms. And we are in Nairobi on 94.4. We are in Mombasa, 87.9, on 2.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, Eldoret, 96.7, 90.9 in Nyeri, 97.7 in Malindi. And our signal from Nairobi, 94.4, is quite strong. Actually, if you're in water, you will catch it, Senator. I have tried it. Go as far as Emali, you get 94.4, so closer to water.
I'm getting comments. Yeah. I think people are on
people are actually on the platform. Yes. Very good. So you are answering Ndu's question which she asked just before we had to break.
She was asking. She mentioned a very heavy word, divorce.
Yes.
And it occurred to me. I don't know whether you noticed over the weekend there was a very huge pullout by a company called Invesco.
Mm-hmm.
In the Standard, a huge pullout of cases that they've been doing. I was wondering if this company can afford to publish in the Standard all their cases in a pullout. Why didn't we put this document?
Because that's an advertisement, really.
It's really they paid for it.
Yes,
I can imagine how much it costs.
A page is probably $1 million shillings. So just
and it was almost 50
maths.
pages.
Yes,
I mean, do the math. You guys are doing
so it
well.
Possible to
I mean, your turnover this year is done. But anyway, how much, and considering that I believe that for purposes of being responsible socially, corporate-wise, Standard Group would have charged the government less to do a pullout in
Actually,
the Standard.
The government has the weekly pullout, the weekly MyGov.
MyGov.
They could basically just ensure that MyGov for this week
could
is
be in there.
Exactly.
And just like you're saying, bite-sized pieces that people will understand.
Yes.
Every week, a little bit about know this document and what it does.
You don't have to publish every day.
Right.
You publish the chapter, because there are 9.
Yep.
You publish the chapter on national ethos. You publish the chapter on leadership integrity. You publish the chapter on, the word divisive, for me, is not correct. It's manipulative.
Manipulative politics.
Manipulative elections. By the way, the minute you solve our elections in Kenya, presidential, that's it.
So we don't even need an expanded executive if you can sort out that.
No, I'm saying that's the flower girl of elections. We're trying to look for a method where if we have a disputed election, you can cut a deal and have the loser, fix the losers,
Don't
leader of
feel so
opposition.
There's something for you.
Not feel bad, here's a sweet, something like that. Let me tell you, I traveled with James Orengo to Brazil, and we were invited to Brazil because of the Solai Dam tragedy. They have the Brumadinho disaster. And we went to the Electoral Commission. I was shocked. They have 103 million registered voters, biometric. And Brazil is big, including the Amazon forest. And they have islands. And they finished their elections at 5, and they announced the results at 7. 2 hours.
They're done.
Done.
but you see,
Chebukati and Chiloba,
irrelevant.
14 million, and only about 8 voted, could not finish, could not give us a correct sum. It's unbelievable. By the way, sometimes I think we are very primitive.
But remember, even
so, is it that Brazil, or is it just manipulation?
No, Brazil, even as we speak, have this biometric system. It's an entire system. You go into a public building, apart from just the ID, the fingerprints, there's a biometric system. Meaning, at every point in your day-to-day business
we know where
life,
you are.
They know who you are and also where you are. And they have your details. Now, we have Huduma number. Okay, sorry, we don't have Huduma number.
We do now.
Where do you? I don't have mine. Where did you get yours?
You applied for. You're waiting for.
Yeah, I'm waiting for.
You see, why I mentioned Huduma number, right now, there is an issue in Brazil, and it's on the subject of what you call data colonization. Because they are asking, all this information you have with your citizenry, first of all, is there protection?
Yes.
Who else do you give these details
And
to?
what are you doing with it?
Data protection.
Yes. Is it really there? And if you're using this information for other purposes, that's where the word colonization comes in.
Yeah.
So this data is actually being used to control your people. And you may take it to somebody else who is not the government, so it poses a new danger. Now, in this country, we've had that question also raised.
We raised that question. We raised this question with the CS when the Huduma number matter was going on. But you know, government sometimes when it wants to do something, they will do it.
Irregardless.
You regardless. You want the chicken. You don't care about the egg. Just get the damn chicken. You know, we'll solve that question later. Because in my foray, because I sat in the ICT committee, and it's the ICT committee of the Senate that drafted the Access to Information Law and the Data Protection Law and the Cybercrime Law. I'm the one who drafted the Cybercrime Law. You understand about data protection. You first of all want to give Kenyans the assurance that once I give you my data, it will not be abused.
Yeah.
Once you have the data, nobody will change it. I walked into Land's office recently, Eric Latif, and I asked for a certain file. The wallet came empty. So I said, could you please open your computers? They opened the computer, and the fake title of that document was in the computer.
Nice.
It's properly scanned and in the computer.
The fake title
The
is
fake
what
title.
isn't.
The system is supposed to ensure that you don't have a fake title. Now, if the Huduma number was supposed to make sure that, Eric Latif, all your assets
Are digitized.
are digitized, your car, your house, your title is in a document which can be accessed. Imagine a Kenyan going into that platform and changing it.
Yep. Inserting the fake ones.
Just inserting, just in detail, removing your name, Eric, and putting Mutua.
Yeah. That's it.
That's it. Because I have cases of people who have gone to lands office, companies, registered fake companies, registered titles, etc., etc. Guys are so ingenious.
Let me ask the question. We have, even in our discussion this morning, we seem to have pointed out that the male culprit, the bottleneck to justice, the bottleneck to implementation of laws that would help us, is etc., is actually the executive.
Yes.
In this show, we identified a silent ministry. When you came in, we were discussing the silent ministry that pervades all other ministries. It's the 21st ministry in this particular government. It's called the Ministry of Impunity.
Which one is that?
I've just said it. It's called the Ministry of Impunity.
Is that the Ministry of Interior?
It's the Ministry of Impunity. It pervades all other ministries and is resident with the executive. Can this particular demon be exorcised?
The demon of the impunity or the demon of the ministry?
No,
The
it's
impunity.
impunity. It's impunity.
It
Because
resides in all ministries
everything that
as
we're
well.
discussing here, whether it is members of the executive behaving in a way that we would prefer they didn't, it's with impunity. It's like they will do
Is it possible to
irrespective-
exercise impunity in this country?
to remove it? Can we
What did you
remove
say?
impunity?
What was your question?
Is it possible to exercise impunity?
Yes, it's possible. It's possible to exercise impunity. It's possible not to have impunity.
Good. How?
It's just sometimes when you see the things that I watch around, I've said there are people in the counties who are now behaving like they were born again on their road to Damascus. They became Paul, and now they are good people.
Yeah.
If we were to punish two people for impunity, punish means assets, abuse of power, etc., etc.
Removed from office. the
Removed
works.
from office, your assets are
jail.
confiscated, jail, and we give you committee uniform,
Meaning a full scholarship.
full scholarship.
Yes.
Like the way Mandela has his uniform, uniform known.
Yes.
And I went to Robben Island, and we know that Minister so and so has got number 149, and it becomes an example in committee.
Yes.
And all assets confiscated, and all assets are brought returned, and bought ambulances. Maybe that would happen.
Until then,
Somebody says it's Kipindire. It says Kipindi.
So it needs to happen to one person or one
Not 10.
individual
Not
needs
10.
to
Just
be made
one.
an example of in this
That's
case,
it.
and we're going to see it drastically reduce or even come to an absolute halt.
I'm talking about pain. Somebody needs to feel the pain of stealing from the public.
The public
and
needs
then
to
the
see blood.
public needs to be fed with the proceeds of this person. You know, you take away his assets, sell them, and then distribute and go and buy medicine and go and buy uniform
And
for
build
kids.
an odd road
Go and
here.
buy desks. Go and build roads. There's a road in Dar es Salaam. When John Paul Magufuli was supposed to be inaugurated and decided, no, this is too expensive. He decided to do a road that has got an emergency lane in the middle. There must be a permanent mark.
To show us this is how we moved away from.
This is the way we moved away from impunity.
Right.
There must be a mark. That is the only mark that people will remember.
Senator, we are coming to the end of the show. About 3 minutes until we let you go.
Show is over. Oh my goodness.
Time flies when you're
Time
having
flies,
fun.
right?
You should have called me for a longer show.
We will actually call you again and again, right? And call you for much longer shows. Now, as we bid goodbye to you, just one thing that you'd like to see coming out of this entire BBI process. Of course, your party leader wants terms of governors removed. We've seen the regional government is an issue that has come out from all of these BBI meetings. What would you like to see out of BBI?
We want to fix our politics. We must fix our politics because we can't have this every 5 years. You know, into another election we have a crisis, and to another one we are going to have a crisis. So exit Uhuru, come another president, we're going to have another crisis. Same thing. We must fix our politics, because if we don't fix our politics, we'll never deal with the real human issues. The book, and maybe Ndu. Look for a book called More Human by Steve Hamilton.
I'm going to write that down.
And More Human by Steve Hamilton it was the advice of James Cameron. You want to see the country moving into things that are more human. You know, if this BBI, we had fixed our politics, and we were just saying, we are now going into primary school, make sure that our primary schools are the best in the world. Close all private schools and make sure everybody goes to the public school and public hospitals. People-driven discussions.
Right.
Because we have already fixed our politics. That is the way I would like to see. But unless we fix the politics, we will never get to Ndu, Mwikali, Latif, Mutula. You're always somewhere below the agenda. So that's a conversation I would like to see. But I would like the Yusuf-led committee to help this country to move forward very quickly. Draft a document. Let's give it end of February.
Give it to the people.
And
Let's give a bill.
Yeah.
Let's go to referendum in August. Give us 2 years to prepare for election. Let the losers go home. Let the winners change this country.
Thank you very much. Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr., Makueni Senator, we have a lot that we could have wanted to ask. Time constraints. We'll ask you again we'll welcome you again, Mutula, so you can come and we'll talk about very many other things.